Let me first make a confession to you. It's been a long week in the office. Not because of anything or anyone that's going on in the office, but because a couple of days I've been locked up in there and no place to go. What I've realized after looking at the scripture, what I've told you the last couple of weeks, I want to add one thing to that. Remember, we've talked about the things that Jesus said that we wish he hadn't. Add to that this week the things that God knows about us that we wish he didn't. There is no place to hide. Psalmist David recognized a part of that. It started out with a sense of lostness, but it ended up being a broken relationship with one who Trace says part of that, and who I've heard over and over and again, who was a man after God's own heart. Sometimes it's easy if we find ourselves needing to do a checkup. Sometimes a yearly one's not good enough. Sometimes it needs to be weekly, if not day by day. So part of what I'm going to share with you this morning is very much a real part of my life. To be reminded again that the Lord looks on the brokenness of our heart. Sometimes that we have to swallow our pride and admit that we've sinned against God. And when we sinned against God, we've also sinned against one another. So that's a start. Sharing something a little bit on a lighter note, and we'll get there. I'm going to come back to this, but I remembered a story this week, and probably you've heard it. So if you have heard it someplace else, then humor me, okay? I'm going to share it again. Phone rang, and a little boy answered the phone in a whisper saying, "Hello." Caller on the other end said, "Is your mommy there?" And the little boy said, "Yes." He said, "Can I speak to her?" And he said, "No, she's busy." "Well, is your father there?" And the little boy said, "Yes, but he's busy too." He said, "Well, is there anybody else there?" And the little boy said, "Yes, my little sister." He said, "Is there an adult there?" He said, "Yes." "Who else is there besides your mom and dad?" He said, "The policeman." I said, "Well, let me talk to one of them." And he said, "They're busy too." "Well, is anybody else there?" And he said, "Yes, the firemen are here." "Well, can I speak to one of them?" And he said, "No, they're busy too." He said, "Good heavens, little boy. Your mom and your dad, the police, and the firemen are busy. What's going on?" And in a whisper he said, "They're looking for me." Lostness, part of that. Can you make the transition? Who's looking for you this morning? You know the story of the psalmist David, and we can tell it in a lot of different ways, but as a part of that, remember that he's confronted with his sin by Nathan. Nathan tells the story about a little lamb, so to speak. David is so terribly upset at that point because this lamb is taken away in the midst of that. And David says that we need to do something about it. This person needs to be punished. And then Nathan says, "David, you are a lamb." That sense of David losing his way, even maybe only for a short period of time, the sin that he was guilty of in the midst of that. And when Nathan confronted him, if I have any understanding of humanity, and I hope that you kind of understand it this way too, if someone confronts us about things that are sinful in our lives, or things that are wrong, we need to know immediately that God already knows it. And David knew that. Maybe that was the thing that kind of kind of brought him to his attention at that point was that this relationship that he loved so much and having with God, all of a sudden something is broken in the midst of that. And how can it be fixed? I don't know about you, but the words "I'm sorry" are not the easiest words to come out of my mouth. There are times we know that we should have done that as a part of it, but we share that. And sometimes we find that heartbreak. We find laughter, but then we find heartbreak in the midst of that. But all of us, at some point or another, have been broken by sin, and only God can help us to correct it. But it's going to take something from us. It takes a willingness and part of that broken heart. David described it so beautifully in the scriptures as part of that. He said, the sacrifice that is acceptable to God is a broken spirit, and a broken and a contrite heart. Oh God, you will not despise. I hate to use this as a reference, but I'm always fascinated by the Clydesdales. I don't have to talk about what they represent, but I'm fascinated by the Clydesdales. Huge, powerful animals. And yet something in their being is broken so that they will yield to the ways of the driver. That brokenness of those things that are untamed and brought about. I guess my favorite as a part of that is the one Clydesdale who breaks away and runs down to see the one who trained him as a part of that. I guess as I referenced that this morning, it's part of a reminder to me, shouldn't that be the same way for us relating to God who created us? And we know that at times we've messed up from being the person that we're called to be. I'm going to have to pause. I've got a distraction. I've got a little spider that keeps running all over my Bible. Oh, did I just kill that spider? I sure did. It wasn't one of those that I like to see. It's a little bitty black one. But anyway. I knew there would be interference with this sermon this morning. I do. And when I think about our running to God, and part of that is recognizing in that brokenness, because David also said in Psalm 139, he says, where can I go from your spirit? If I rise on the wings of the morning, if I go to my grave, if I go to the sea, it doesn't make any difference, but I cannot get away from who you are. There are those times in our lives, again, when that lostness leads to brokenness. We get there at times, sometimes by deliberate actions. We've just chosen that way. Sometimes we don't like anybody telling us what we ought to do. We're just saying, I'm not going to do it. It's like the little boy, his mom kept trying to get him to sit down. He just kept getting back up and getting back up. And she said, I told you to sit down. And he sat down. So finally he said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll sit down, but on the inside I'm standing up. Sometimes maybe it's the same spirit that we have, a rebellious spirit. But it's a part of recognizing that it's not only that thing that we may do intentionally, but sometimes we do it inadvertently. Sometimes as sheep, and David understood sheep, and Jesus as the good shepherd understood. Sometimes we just wander off. It takes us a while before we recognize it. I've always been told the story about sheep is that they like to green down grass, and they'll put their head down and they'll keep going at that point, and all of a sudden it's almost as if they look up and say, where's the rest of the foe? Where are the rest of the sheep? But this one, content on its own way, kept going further and further and further away. But the master, the good shepherd, went and searched, even for the one, even though 99 were safe and foe. David, again, confronted by Nathan, is a part of that and recognizes those things in his life. But the same is true probably in our lives. We cannot hide from God. In the darkness and in the light, God is there. It's sad to say, but for many times, sometimes it's inside the church, sometimes outside the church. But I think the thing that I'm reminded of, and for me as a part of it, is sometimes we've lost our God consciousness. We do what we want to do it, we do it when we want to do it, and yet sometimes in the midst of that, we really don't consider the relationship that we have with God. Sometimes we hurt others along the way. Sometimes we may get a little prick here or there as a part of that in our lives. And yet somehow or another we no longer feel guilty. David faced up to the guilt and again simply said, I've sinned against the Lord. That kind of brokenness, the brokenness of a heart, is beautiful. Did you hear the song? Thanks, Tracy. I forgot the words to it. I thought I remembered the title. That sense of brokenness, sometimes this way, sometimes another. In the midst of that, we recognize those things in our life. David was sorry for his sin. Jesus went on to share in another passage about those who have that prideful heart. In the midst of that, he told the story about two persons who went up to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee. The Pharisee was the most devoutly religious person in the country. He came to the temple, the scripture says, he came to the temple 3 times a day to pray. Anybody do that? Do you know if anybody does that today? He left probably what was his busy day at the noon hour and would come to the temple and pray. He was there that morning. He was there that night as a part of that. He came. He also was required to give 10% of all of his income. Jewish law required that he fast from food 1 day per year, and yet he did it twice a week. On this day, he stood at the front of the sanctuary. He glanced at the others worshiping, and you could see contempt in his eyes. He said, Lord, how thankful I am that I'm not like the rest of these folks. I'm not loitering on the street corner. I'm not a drug abuser or living on welfare. I thank you I'm not like others in this world. Oh Lord, it's hard to be humble when you're perfect in every way. That's just a little bit different translation. But that's what he said. Then there was a fellow standing outside of the temple, the court of the Gentiles. He couldn't go in because he recognized his sinfulness. He was accused of being a traitor, unpatriotic to his country. He was a tax collector. He was a fraud. He was out for all he could get. He looked on the inside to see who he was. He was ashamed of his failings in life and all the things that he had done and he couldn't do. And the scripture says that all he could do was beat his breast and say, oh God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Which of those two prayers were heard by God? The prayer of the Pharisee never got above the ceiling. But the tax collector, all of a sudden the bells in heaven started ringing that the angels even had to cover their ears, because when the brokenness of a heart happens, things turn into beauty. David struggled in those situations. Life just at times, all of us. I don't know about you, but isn't it amazing? You know, we said at that point, it's kind of like, you know, the things that we say, well, what happened in high school stays in high school. It's like when folks go to Vegas, they say, whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Don't you hate it when somebody brings up something that happened in your life a long time ago and you remember the hurt and the pain and the brokenness? Only God can continue to heal that, but we need those places as reminders That when we find that sense of lostness and that brokenness in our relationship, we begin to recognize, because when we look at those things, there's a part of that pride that comes. I jotted down a few things. Some of them I borrowed. I don't mind telling you that. But listen to part of that, to those who are proudful and don't recognize that a relationship is strained or broken. The proud people focus on sins of others. Broken people know their sins. Proud people need to prove they're right. Broken people yield their right to be right. Proud people claim their rights with demanding spirit. Broken people find a sense of meekness. Proud people want to be served. Broken are willing to serve. Proud people have a hard time saying, I was wrong. Broken are quite quick to confess and to repent. Proud people don't feel the need anymore of God, but others do. Proud people compare themselves to others. Broken people compare themselves to the holiness of God. I don't want to stand in judgment, but I think there's some other folks in this room just like I am. We've forgotten the holiness and the awesomeness of God. And in doing that, at times we've become complacent about the things that matter most. And in a sense of humility and the brokenness of our hearts and our lives, we confess to God that we've missed the mark, that we've come up short. And only His love, His mercy, and His grace can reclaim us. We're called to share that in the world. And I tell you, when we struggle with those things in our own lives, there are times that we see ourselves a certain way. And other people see us a different way. And then there's a way that God sees us. God sees us on the one hand as that person who's broken and still with things that need to be corrected and fixed. And then He sees us on the other hand as the way He wants us to be. And probably somewhere we're in the middle. But I hope we're moving into more the way that God sees us as a part of that. The midst of the song, in the midst of the scripture, was a story that was told. The late Scotsman William Barclay, probably a lot of you have read his commentaries on the scriptures. Barclay was on his way by train one particular time in his life from Glasgow, Scotland to London. As he made his way through the countryside and into Yorkshire, he noticed a little whitewashed cottage. It seemed like it was just shining out the window of the train. It's just beautiful. A few days later, Barclay made the return trip back to Glasgow. In the interval, snow had fallen on the ground. It was deep all around. He noticed again the little white cottage. But this time, its whiteness seemed drab, and almost to the point that it was soiled to a gray color in comparison to the virgin white snow. Sometimes we see one thing, and then out of God's creation, the Scripture says, and the song says, and we shall be whiter than snow. Not something that loses its goodness, not something that loses its grace, and yet sometimes we just find a way in small little things that sometimes we don't think matter anymore. Just don't worry about it. You've heard me share this, and it's always fascinating to me, again, in part of it. How many of you look for pennies, look down at the ground and look for pennies every once in a while? You find them everywhere. It's almost that pennies are not worth anything anymore. You remember I told you my daddy always told me pennies make dollars. Takes a lot more of it. But I think sometime in our society today, we've almost become a throwaway society as a part of our faith journey. In the midst of that, we throw other people away. And God says He calls for us to have that brokenness of heart, contrite heart, recognizing that we do miss the mark, and to continue to walk closely with Him so that we might understand the fullness of what God has done in our lives. Maybe it's just a reminder. Maybe the sermon today was only for me. The question is, what am I going to do about it? I've heard that question asked before. You've been through the great banquet, and you've been through Emmaus and Christmas and all that. From what you've experienced of the love and grace of Jesus Christ, what are you going to do about it? Sometimes we need to just do some reflection. Sometimes we need to call and ask God to give us a clean heart, renew a right spirit within us, to set our lives as broken as they are, offered to Him to make something beautiful again, or even more beautiful than it is. Billy Batchett said this morning to me, and I thought about this. We were in the prayer room, we offered prayer. There was a picture over in the corner that his sister painted. He said her birthday's coming up. I think he maybe even said it today. And he said, I'm going to take a picture of it and send it to her and tell her I was thinking about her. It's a great picture, but in Billy's eyes, it was far greater because his sister painted it than it was in my eyes. I don't care if you tell him now. You'll hear it later if I remember to say it again. But the beauty of what God sees in us is something that you and I really don't have the ability to see in other people. He sees our faults. He sees our needs, our shortcomings, and He looks beyond those. And He does something beautiful with our lives. Please don't take this as condemnation, but take it as there is something beautiful in all of us. And God sees it, and we're called to heighten it so that others will be able to see it for the glory of God. David recognized it and said, I've sinned. I've sinned, I've messed up. King Saul had messed up. Did you know that? King Saul messed up, and his was incomplete obedience. He had not been obedient. He rationalized, he made excuses as a part of that. And you know what happened when he lost? He lost his throne. But read the rest of the scripture. God's Spirit withdrew from him. What would we be without God's Spirit? Even sometimes we don't pay a lot of attention to it. We wouldn't have anything. Brokenness. The brokenness of the heart of God before you. You will not despise. Make something beautiful out of our lives in the name of the Father and of the Son